Her brother, and the other children sat obediently in a row in front of the fireplace, where flames roared and crackled. Leon stood before them, dressed in a fur coat several sizes too big, making him look a bit funny. But no one minded, it kept him warm. Leon regarded the group of children with a serious expression, an idea forming in his mind, though he knew he needed to speak first. He scanned their confused and uneasy faces, and then, in a voice that was young but clear, he began. We come from different countries in Eastern Europe. We've endured torture and pain that most people can't even imagine. Even though we've escaped from that hellish place, I believe those who hurt us won't give up so easily. Now, you have a choice. A few hundred kilometers away, there's a city called Yekaterinburg. I can send you to the local authorities there. They might protect you, or they might send you to an orphanage where someone could adopt you. Leon paused, waiting for the children's responses. Several of the younger children, around 8 or 9 years old, were too timid to speak. They just looked at Leon eagerly. For them, it didn't matter what authorities or orphanages might be out there, they only wanted to follow Leon. The older children exchanged glances, uncertain. Wanda, more mature for her age, spoke up. She looked at Leon with wide eyes full of hope and excitement. Those governments care about us Eastern Europeans. I joined Hydra for revenge. They said they could give Pietro and me strength. We've been disappointed so many times this past year, but you're the only one who succeeded. Do you want to go back? Leon asked. Wanda shook her head, confused. I don't know. In reality, by leaving the base with Pietro and Leon, she had already made her choice. She could have stayed behind if she had wanted to. After staring at Wanda for a moment, Leon turned to the others. What's your choice? He asked. We want to follow you, Leon. Wanda is right, the Russians won't care about us, one of the stronger boys replied without hesitation. These children were either orphans or street kids. They had already lost faith in governments, especially those in countries that weren't their own. Instead of going to Russia and being resettled by the authorities, they preferred to follow Leon. Leon's ability to infiltrate the base on his own was a power they could rely on. As Leon scanned the serious faces of the children in front of him, he laughed softly. We're all alone, we have no families. But we have each other. From now on, we're a family, and we'll rely on each other. Yes, the children responded eagerly, nodding with joy, including the younger ones, just 8 or 9 years old. To them, Leon was like a warm sun, giving them hope. Even Wanda and Pietro felt the same way. Though they longed for the strength to seek revenge, it felt good to have a family, right? We need to find a place to hide where Hydra can't reach us, Leon continued. Although they haven't found us yet, we need to leave as soon as possible. Leon continued, this place is several hundred kilometers from the base, but it's too close to the road and too conspicuous. I have no doubt that Hydra will find us here. So where should we go? Wanda asked. Leon pulled out a map and pointed to one of the long lines under the firelight. The Ural Mountains are a vast range stretching across Russia. We're in a region where it's windy and snowy year-round. It's less than 500 kilometers from Yekaterinburg, so getting there by car with supplies won't be difficult. Hidden by wind, snow, and trees, it would be nearly impossible for them to find us. They'd never expect us to make our home there. Given their identities and numbers, it was nearly impossible for them to leave Russia without exposing Hydra's secrets, and there was no need to run. As long as they had the resources to survive, that was enough. The harsh environment was also perfect for training. When he and these children were grown, even if Hydra didn't come for them, Leon planned to seek them out. How do we get there? One of the children asked. I'll leave for Yekaterinburg now to buy daily necessities in a car. You all pack your things and wait for me to return. We'll set off tonight. Okay. The children responded in unison, their admiration for Leon growing. He was so mature in his speech and decision-making, he seemed more like an adult. Leon had become their backbone, making them feel safe and secure. Leon smiled softly. After adjusting his clothes, he wasted no time and went to the window, gazing out at the distant road. He was waiting. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, through the heavy snowfall, he heard the sound of a car engine. The headlights pierced the snowy darkness, brighter than those of an ordinary car. As the vehicle finally passed by the wooden house, Leon quickly opened the door. Ignoring the worried looks of the children, he ran out into the wind and snow. Swoosh! A flash of golden light streaked through the storm. Leon moved like a bolt of lightning, cutting through the snow at a speed too fast for the naked eye to follow. In mere moments, he covered hundreds of meters and caught up with the large truck. It was carrying a load of wood. Without hesitation, he leapt onto the piled logs at the back of the truck. He lay down on the plastic sheet covering the wood, huddling inside his coat. Soon, the heavy snow began to fall more intensely, completely covering him. He started to breathe steadily, using the sun-breathing technique, Hinokami Kagura. An ancient castle somewhere in Siberia. In his office, Baron Strucker, one of the supreme leaders of Hydra, stood by the door and window, wearing a thick down coat. He gazed at the heavy snow outside while listening to the reports from his subordinates. As he absorbed the news, a fanatical expression spread across his face. Finally, the experiment was successful. That child's abilities have awakened, he exclaimed. He suddenly turned to face his subordinates, focusing on the top commander of the base where Leon had been held. "Yes, Baron," the man replied, handing over a tablet. On the screen, footage from the base's security cameras played. Baron watched as a boy, glowing with golden light, ran at a speed beyond ordinary comprehension. The soldiers had no chance to react. Before they could even think about defending themselves, they were slaughtered by the golden flashes, which streaked through the scene like lightning and thunder. Each punch and kick delivered by the boy carried tremendous force. Bullets pierced his body but had no effect at all. The more Baron Strucker watched, the more his happiness and fanaticism grew. "Perfect, simply perfect," he murmured. "Strength, speed. Once Hydra can mass-produce such warriors, our era of rule will begin." His voice rose with excitement as he grabbed his subordinate by the collar. "Find him, hunt him down at all costs. I want his experimental data. I want to see his body lying on the test bench." Strucker's eyes were wild and bloodshot as he roared with fervor. "Yes, Baron," the men responded loudly, startled by his intensity. They quickly turned and left. Baron Strucker poured himself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching as the castle gates opened. He observed the convoy of cars carrying soldiers and the planes taking off. As he sipped his wine, he murmured, "Long live Hydra." Then, he downed the rest in one gulp. Yekaterinburg, the capital of Sverdlovsk Oblast in Russia, is an important center for industry, transportation, trade, science, and culture. This industrial city was developing rapidly, though its population density remained low. A truck carrying lumber entered the city, and when no one was paying attention, Leon quietly slipped out and jumped onto a secluded section of the road. Like many people from Eastern European countries at that time, Leon understood Russian, so he had no trouble communicating, which is why he came to Yekaterinburg alone. It was snowing heavily as Leon made his way through a commercial street. His oversized fur coat and hat made him stand out, but in this era, Russia's economy was still struggling, and most people were more concerned with their own survival than with the appearance of a stranger. Leon found a shop on the commercial street and bought clothes that fit him. While there, he also asked about the current year. It was 2005. No wonder the purchasing power of the ruble during this period was still strong. Leon had brought almost all his rubles with him, along with a stack of US dollars, just in case. There were still 7 years before the Battle of New York, but that was more than enough time for him to grow. In 2005, Russia was in a stage of economic recovery, but the variety of goods was somewhat limited. When Leon found a car dealership, he didn't go for an off-road vehicle or a truck. Instead, he focused on buying an RV. However, buying the RV didn't go as smoothly as expected. The main issue was Leon's age. The dealership owner thought he was joking and nearly dismissed him. Fortunately, Leon had cash on hand. Once he pulled out a stack of US dollars, the owner's attitude changed immediately. As far as the owner was concerned, money made you an adult. The issues of age and a driver's license suddenly became trivial, and th. Dealership owner no longer cared about them. He filled up the gas tank and even added a few extra barrels of oil to the RV. With a cheerful wave from the burly dealership owner, Leon drove away. Before leaving the city, Leon stocked up on a large amount of clothes and supplies. Everything went smoothly, without any unexpected incidents. This surprised Leon a little. It confirmed what he already suspected: having money made things easier, even for a 13-year-old buying so many supplies. By the time he completed the trip, it was nearly nightfall. When Leon returned to the wooden house, Wanda and the other children heard the noise. They cautiously peeked through the window. When they saw Leon get out of the car and open the door, they happily opened the wooden house door. "We can leave now," Leon announced. Under his direction, he and the children carried the metal boxes from the wooden house and loaded them into the RV. The RV, converted from a heavy truck, was enormous: 15 tons in weight, 11 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and 3.85 meters high. It was equipped with 2 large beds, a kitchen, a bathroom, an 800-liter freshwater tank, a 600-liter wastewater tank, and a 300-liter toilet water tank. Leon didn't bother with the rest of the RV's specifications; they didn't really matter to him. The RV was just a means of transportation and a temporary residence. Once they built their wooden house in the Ural Mountains, the RV would no longer be of much use. He planned to drive it away and scrap it eventually, just in case Hydra traced it back to the car dealership owner. In the future, he would buy a pickup truck for daily necessities. After all the children were inside the RV, Leon turned on the air conditioner and began driving out of the cabin. Their next destination was 3 hours away. Driving through a heavy snowstorm in the middle of the night was undoubtedly dangerous, but with the map and accurate route he had purchased in the city, Leon was confident they would make it. The warm air conditioning and cozy cabin made the children excited. Under Leon's guidance, they took turns using the bathroom to bathe and change into new clothes. During the drive, Wanda, being older, helped the 2 youngest girls take their baths. After changing into clean underwear and a sweater, she took a seat in the passenger side. At 13, Wanda was still growing into the powerful and beautiful Scarlet witch she would become. The constant pain from the experiments had left her looking haggard. She looked like she wanted to say something but kept stopping. Noticing Wanda's hesitance, Leon, focused on the road, asked, "What's on your mind, Wanda?" Leon, Wanda began, struggling to find her words. "Are you feeling a bit overwhelmed about the future?" Leon asked gently. Wanda nodded, her gaze distant. She wasn't one to be insincere, but she carried many burdens. "Believe me," Leon reassured her, "the future will be better than that hellish place we came from. Time will prove that." "I know," Wanda replied softly. "I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed." She sat, hugging her legs, her chin resting on her knees, gazing the window at the encroaching darkness and the vast expanse of white snow. "Hatred is just one part of life," Leon said. "Living in hatred only brings more pain. I'm sure your parents wouldn't want that for you, Wanda." "Maybe," Wanda said, unable to fully respond. She tilted her head and looked at Leon's face. "You're very different. Even though I don't know why, you remind me of the pastors in church." "Really? It's a shame I don't believe in God," Leon replied. "So, who do you believe in?" Wanda asked. "I don't have faith in anyone else," Leon said. "But I do believe in myself." "Remember to not give away your faith too easily, Wanda." In the dark night, amid heavy wind and snow, only one RV was speeding along the road. Thanks to its snow-gripping tires, the RV moved steadily through the snow. Leon finally reached the area near the mountain range. He drove off the road and stopped under the snow-covered ground, not far from the road. With no mountain roads and the darkness making navigation difficult, Leon and the children decided to spend the night in the RV. The RV was well equipped with facilities and supplies, including a diesel generator with plenty of power. Since the site was elevated, they didn't have to worry about heavy snowfall flooding the RV overnight. The night passed peacefully. When Leon woke up the next morning, he had breakfast and then gazed alone at the mountains, his blonde hair glowing like golden light. It took him the entire morning to find suitable spot for building a wooden house, about 2 kilometers away from the mountains. He found a good flat area on the mountainside, surrounded by tall trees and lush vegetation. A river nearby had a waterfall upstream. The heavy snow had turned the area into a shimmering silver landscape. Leon was very satisfied with the location, both for its suitability and its concealment. In the following days, Leon worked alone to clear the trees around the site and process the wood. He handled every aspect of the construction, laying the foundation, digging drainage ditches, processing the wood, driving piles, and capping the structure. Building the wooden house wasn't particularly difficult, especially since Russia has a tradition of such construction. Leon obtained a construction drawing from a local furniture store. His physical fitness had improved to exceed that of a normal adult, making the work easier and also serving as good practice. Throughout the construction, he used the sun-breathing technique to continuously strengthen his cardiopulmonary function, which helped him work faster over time. In less than 5 days, Leon completed the wooden house. It was about 200 square meters in size, relatively simple in design, and had a rugged, straightforward appearance. Once the wooden house was completed, Leon began transporting heavy materials. It's worth noting that carrying such loads through the snow would be impossible for most people, but for someone like Leon, who was in top physical condition, it was just another task to enjoy. After spending an entire day moving the supplies, Leon instructed each of the children to carry their own clothes and toiletries and toward the wooden house. Despite their exhaustion from trekking through mountains and rivers, the children's faces were filled with smiles and anticipation. They were thrilled to finally have a home of their own. The journey took several hours due to their slow pace and frequent stops. When they finally arrived at the cabin, the sight of the square wooden house and the white snow covering the roof filled the tired children with excitement. "Wow, is this our future home? It's beautiful. Brother Leon, you're amazing." "It's great, Leon." Although the wooden house was a bit rough around the edges, to the children, it was a beautiful sight. Even Wanda and Pietro were excited. Leon smiled as he led the children into the house. They set up the beds together. 2 large beds, one for the boys and one for the girls. After arranging the soft, warm bedding, the exhausted children lay down, listening to the sound of the heavy snow outside the window. It was quiet and peaceful. After the long journey, everyone was not only exhausted but also hungry. Leon got up and began preparing dinner. Seeing this, the other children also got up from their beds and helped with the preparations. Their willingness to pitch in pleased Leon greatly. Over the past few days, Leon had observed the children's behavior. He had not mentioned the breathing technique and had focused on getting to know them better. He found that, overall, the children had good characters, they were kind and not selfish. By the time dinner was ready, the fireplace was glowing warmly. At the dining table, Leon and the children enjoyed their meal. After washing the dishes, they all went to bed, exhausted. The next morning, Leon woke up early. He drove the RV to a spot near Yekaterinburg, found a way to discreetly enter the city, and then blew up the RV with a laser. He then went into the city, where he ordered a new vehicle from a dealership over the phone and completed the transaction through his account. He took great care to remain unseen throughout the process. After purchasing some daily necessities, Leon drove the pickup truck back to the mountains, bringing with him a large load of supplies. By the time he returned to the cabin, it was almost noon. Wanda and the others had already woken up and prepared lunch, eagerly awaiting Leon's return so they could eat together. When Leon arrived home with the supplies, Wanda and the other children, who had been sitting in front of the fireplace chatting and warming up, immediately stood up and came over excitedly. Leon gently patted the head of the youngest girl and then casually placed the supplies in the kitchen. Afterward, everyone gathered for lunch. Lunch was simple but satisfying, featuring bread, fried steak, lamb chops, chicken, and stew. The meal was easy to prepare and enjoyable. After lunch, with everyone having washed the dishes and dressed in thick down jackets, they gathered around the fireplace. Leon addressed the group, saying, "From now on, we will live here for a long time. We are all people who have been abandoned and forgotten by the world, and we have endured experiences that most people can't imagine." Despite his young voice, Leon's words and gaze were serious, and everyone looked at him attentively, the person who had led them out of hell. Leon continued, "We will still be hunted by those villains in the future. Our crisis won't disappear easily. Therefore, we must stay hidden from the world here. But this doesn't mean we have given up. Our future is bright, but we need strength to reach that light. We, the forgotten ones, don't need anyone else to redeem us. We have each other." His words were calm, not impassioned, but they stirred deep emotions in Wanda, Pietro, and the others. "We need to strengthen ourselves," Leon said. Wanda, being the most perceptive, seemed to grasp the essence of Leon's words. Her large, expressive eyes sparkled with excitement. One of the boys with brown hair scratched his head and asked, "How can we become stronger?" The others nodded in agreement, looking to Leon for answers. Unlike Leon, they didn't have the ability to penetrate a base on their own. Seeing their confused expressions, Leon smiled softly. "I've decided to teach you a breathing technique," Leon announced. "Breathing technique?" Everyone looked puzzled. What could that possibly mean? Leon began his explanation. "The breathing technique is something I developed back at the base. It's designed to strengthen the body. If you master it, you'll push your physical fitness beyond what ordinary people can achieve. Let me show you what it can do. Will we be able to become as strong as you?" A curious child asked. "Not exactly, but you will definitely become stronger," Leon replied. "Actions speak louder than words." Leon clapped his hands, stood up, and led Wanda and the others outside the wooden house. The cold had left a thick layer of frost on the ground, and the noise of the snowstorm filled the air. At the far end of the area, Leon positioned a stone about 2 meters high. Wanda held the hands of the two youngest girls and watched intently with the others from 10 meters away. With a dozen pairs of eyes on him, Leon took a deep breath and began his demonstration. Fu tilde, the sound of his breathing was thunderous, even from a distance. The air surged in with a powerful force, and everyone could hear it clearly. The breath of the sun. A surge of intense heat radiated from Leon, causing the thick layer of snow on the ground beneath him to visibly melt away. He crouched slightly, with his feet positioned forward and backward, then raised his right hand, clenched his fist, and swung it forward. Boom! The punch hit with the force of a mountain splitting apart. The shockwave surged outward with tremendous power. The 2-meter-high stone shattered into 4 pieces, and debris flew in all directions. Cracks spread across the stone before it finally disintegrated and collapsed. Wanda and the children stared in wide-eyed amazement, stunned into silence. Once they recovered from their shock, they rushed forward to examine the shattered stone. Wanda even reached out to touch the fragments. "This power is unbelievable," Wanda murmured. "Is this what the breathing technique can do?" Another child asked, awe in their voice. "It's incredible," someone else echoed. "Mommy, am I dreaming?" one of the younger kids said. The children were filled with admiration and excitement. The boys began to fantasize about learning the breathing technique and acquiring such power for themselves. The demonstration made them realize just how crucial strength could be. They understood that the breathing technique could profoundly change their lives. Leon turned around, and waves of heat emanated from his body, making him seem like a human fireplace. This is the power of the breathing technique, and this is only the beginning. When mastered to its full potential, it can enable one person to demolish a building. Here, shielded from the outside world and amidst harsh conditions, we can accelerate our growth. Remember, I promise to guide all of you to a brighter future. Leon's calm tone and the fiery intensity in his eyes left a lasting impression on everyone. Even the youngest children, including the girls, were filled with anticipation. Leon promptly took everyone back to the wooden house and began teaching the breathing technique. This technique involves rhythmic breathing that distributes oxygen to every cell in the body, enhancing natural healing, stabilizing the mind, and activating the spirit. Prope. Posture and synchronized breathing are essential for its effectiveness. Everyone removed their heavy down jackets, donned sweaters, and adopted a slightly squatting position to begin the exercise. If anyone's posture was incorrect or their breathing rhythm faltered, Leon was quick to notice and correct them. Of course, in addition to breathing exercises, physical training was also essential. For the younger children, around 8 or 9 years old, the routine involved basic exercises. However, the older children, including Wanda, were tasked with chopping down trees with axes. Yes, chopping down trees. This full-body exercise not only worked out the body's core and muscles but also provided firewood for heating and materials for constructing or renovating the wooden house. Given that a single wooden house wouldn't suffice for over a dozen people as they grew older, this approach was practical and efficient. After giving these instructions, Leon began his own training. Unlike the others, he wore only a thin layer of underwear and sweatpants. Nearby, he saw a large stone, more than 200 meters tall, and began a rigorous workout. While practicing the sun-breathing technique, he lifted and carried stones while doing squats. This intense exercise was both primitive and highly effective. The sight of Leon pushing himself to such extremes not only reinforced his strength in the eyes of the others but also deeply motivated everyone. Leon's example made it clear that no one could afford to be lazy. They all persevered and pushed through their difficulties, inspired by his dedication. They were determined to gain strength and knew they couldn't afford to miss this chance. After the intense exercises, everyone was exhausted but continued to practice the breathing technique. This rhythmic breathing allowed them to absorb large amounts of oxygen and distribute it throughout their bodies, which helped quickly alleviate their fatigue. Following their workouts, Leon and the others used nutrient solutions to replenish their energy. However, a challenge arose: the sun-breathing technique was too overpowering. It emitted great energy and also needed a suitable body type to execute it, making it difficult for anyone other than Leon to handle. As a result, no one else could fully master the technique. Leon had anticipated this issue. Over the coming days, he would practice alongside everyone, adapting the sun-breathing technique to create a modified version that suited their capabilities. This new method would be tailored to align with each individual's needs. As time passed, they continued to train, steadily advancing and growing stronger. 2 years flew by in the blink of an eye. In a secluded base nestled in the mountains of eastern Siberia, the night was quiet under a light rain. The darkness was punctuated only by the high spotlights on the guard towers, which swept the area back and forth. Armed guards, looking stern and vigilant, were on high alert, as if expecting trouble. Despite the calm appearance of the night, disaster was already on the horizon. Suddenly, a loud explosion shattered the silence. Boom! An explosion roared through the sky like thunder, making the soldiers guarding and patrolling the base instinctively look up. They saw a blinding golden light, reminiscent of a meteorite falling from the heavens with immense grandeur. It struck the center of the base with overwhelming force. Boom! The ground shook violently from the impact. The powerful blast sent a shockwave sweeping in all directions, hurling nearby soldiers several meters away and leaving them unconscious. Smoke and dust filled the air, and a long, piercing siren blared through the base. Tilde woohoo tilde woohoo tilde, the rhythmic siren echoed, alerting everyone within the base. Hundreds of fully armed soldiers rushed out, forming a perimeter around the area. Weapons were raised and pointed at the swirling dust and smoke, fingers poised on triggers. On the sentry towers, guards prepared their anti-aircraft machine guns. As the light rain began to clear the dust and smoke, and the high spotlights illuminated the scene, a tall, imposing figure began to emerge from the haze. The base leader and several deputies watched anxiously, their eyes fixed on the figure whose face was slowly revealed under the intense spotlight. He stood about 1.8 meters tall, with short black hair fluttering in the wind. His outfit consisted of a red leather jacket with black and white cross stripes, black tights, and white sneakers, accessorized with a necklace hanging around his neck. His facial features were sharp and extremely well defined. "Damn it, that monster is really here," the leader muttered under his breath, his pupils narrowing as he took in the sight of the intruder. As the commander of the Hydra base, he was well acquainted with many secrets. 2 years ago, a child had suddenly awakened extraordinary abilities and managed to penetrate their base, escaping with a dozen other children. Baron Strucker, then overjoyed, launched a massive search effort, but after a year and a half of fruitless searching, his satisfaction turned to frustration. Half a year ago, the child reappeared and attacked one of their bases with near-invincible power. During that raid, the boy displayed a force nearly akin to a natural disaster. He moved like a streak of light, eluding capture with ease. His golden particle rays could easily demolish buildings, and each of his attack was comparable to that of a TNT bomb. The base was utterly obliterated by Leon's unmatched strength. Baron Strucker's rage intensified upon witnessing the boy's growth. The fact that Leon had become so powerful in such a short time drove Baron to mobilize all of Eastern Europe's Hydra forces in a desperate hunt. Yet, despite his efforts, Leon remained elusive, disappearing immediately after the raid. They were unable to discover one sign of him in all of Eastern Europe. In the past 6 months, 3 Hydra bases had been raided and destroyed. Baron Strucker got caught in one such raid, and this left him not just injured but nearly incapacitated, with broken bones and severe damage. As a result, all Hydra bases in Eastern Europe had bolstered their defenses, including close-in artillery and comprehensive security systems. They spent whatever budget they had in fortifying the bases. However, no one expected the intruder to strike with such force tonight. The entire Hydra base was in disarray. Rumors that Baron had even fled his primary base out of fear had already begun circulating. The base leader, both angry and frustrated, cursed under his breath. If he did that loud, he was afraid he might die from the bullet of another Hydra member rather than the light beam of Leon. The monster who had breached their defenses proved that ordinary weapons were ineffective against him. With this in mind, the leader watched as Leon, now 15 and noticeably taller and more mature than he was 2 years ago, addressed the situation with calm confidence. His demeanor had shifted from that of a young boy to someone who exuded confidence and maturity. "Excuse me, folks," Leon said, his voice carrying over the chaos. "If you'd be so kind, please put down your weapons and surrender. We can skip the part where I have to deal with you forcefully." As Leon faced the dense gunfire with calm assurance, it was clear he had complete faith in his own strength. It would be foolish to come unprepared when trying to deal against Hydra after all. Observing the cold-faced Hydra soldiers, he couldn't help but think that Hydra's brainwashing techniques were godly, far surpassing even those of multi-level marketing schemes. They were, indeed, masters in their field. After scanning the area, Leon's gaze settled on the base leader, who stood out due to his distinctive attire at the back of the group of soldiers. "It seems you're the leader of this Hydra base," Leon said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Yes, number 37. You know you are quite impressive," the commander called out, trying to reason with Leon. "But you should be grateful to us." Leon merely sneered at the commander's attempt at whatever he was trying. Realizing his approach was futile, the commander shifted tactics. He clenched a remote control in his hand and aimed to intimidate Leon. "No one in Hydra fears death," the commander declared. "If necessary, we'll die together. With this remote, I can trigger a explosion that will destroy the base and you with it." Leon shrugged nonchalantly. "The key is whether you can actually do it." Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, the darkness was abruptly pierced. The commander instinctively closed his eyes against the sudden brightness but quickly refocused and hovered a finger over the red button on the remote with determination. Unfortunately, before the commander could press the button, a strong hand clamped tightly around his wrist. Feeling a sharp sting, he quickly opened his eyes to a startling sight. Leon, who had been surrounded by soldiers just moments ago, was now standing directly in front of him. The high spotlight behind Leon cast a shadow over his face, making it appear slightly blurred, but his golden eyes shone through with an intense, almost divine, gaze that made the commander feel insignificant. For a moment, the commander was frozen in shock, his left wrist still held in Leon's grip. He quickly regained his composure and reached for his gun with his free hand. But before he could draw it, Leon's knee slammed into his abdomen, leaving him gasping for breath. Bang! The bullet was shot but didn't hit anything, and the impact of the Leon's knee sent the commander twitching to the ground. As he collapsed, the other Hydra soldiers snapped out of their brief disorientation. They turned to launch an attack, but Leon's eyes suddenly sharpened. Boom! In an instant, it was as if time itself had frozen. A powerful, domineering will surged from Leon, sweeping across the entire base like the resurrection of ancient gods. A red halo, visible to the naked eye, spread out in all directions. The overwhelming force was almost tangible, crushing the spirits of everyone in the base. The soldiers, eyes dulled, losing their light as they collapsed unconscious to the ground. The walls and sentry towers of the base cracked under the pressure of Leon's aura. This was why Leon, even knowing that the Hydra base had a self-destruction system, dared to break in alone. A year ago, he had mastered the Conqueror's Haki, a skill perfect for overwhelming large groups. With the entire base subdued, Leon began to search for loot with practiced ease. He no longer cared for basic materials, his focus was on confidential documents, money, and advanced technology. These were the true prizes, worth more than the entire base. However, Leon's luck wasn't particularly great this time. He didn't find any advanced technology, but he did stumble upon something unexpected: the formula for the nutrient solution. In Leon's eyes, this was a treasure. The nutrient solution had been crucial in keeping up with the intense physical demands of his training, allowing him to grow stronger every day. The year before, his rapid development was largely thanks to the consistent nutrition it provided. This formula wasn't just valuable for him, it meant a lot to the other kids as well. With this, their progress could continue uninterrupted. This trip was definitely not in vain. After thoroughly searching the base, Leon found no experimental subjects. Satisfied with his findings, he transformed into pure energy. A beam of light leaping into the sky. Before leaving, he pressed the detonation button on the remote control he had taken. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed through the night, and a massive fireball lit up the area, a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. As he watched the flames, Leon turned into light and vanished into the dark sky. Meanwhile, in front of an apartment in a neighborhood in Yekaterinburg, a slender woman wearing a gray sweatshirt and hood, holding an umbrella in one hand and a bag in the other, pressed the doorbell. Ding dong! A sharp sound echoed through the quiet apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached from inside. The door creaked open, revealing a young man with short brown-black hair and a sturdy build. He eyed the woman at the door and raised an eyebrow. Without exchanging words, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She nodded slightly in acknowledgement and walked in. The young man leaned forward slightly, his gaze flicking briefly to the left, scanning a specific spot on the street before closing the door behind her. The lights inside cast a warm glow over the sparsely furnished living room. Near the window stood a tall, burly man, around 1.8 meters in height, clad in a black windbreaker that clung tightly to his muscular frame. Picked up quite a few tails, Wanda, the man remarked, turning away from the window and stepping into the living room. His voice carried a hint of concern as he watched the woman empty the contents of her bag into a metal box. The woman removed her hood, revealing her delicate features and striking red hair. It was Wanda. 2 years of youthfulness and uncertainty had given way to maturity and confidence, her face now reflecting the extraordinary changes she had undergone. In addition to a few local thugs keeping watch, there's a group from Hydra too, Wanda replied calmly as she finished storing the supplies. She walked over to the window, her gaze sweeping the street below, her eyes flashing with a quiet, measured intensity. Looks like they finally tracked us down. At that moment, the young man entered the room, sipping from a carton of milk. Wanda glanced at her brother, her eyes softening with affection. She then turned to the strong man. Sergey, is our car ready? It's parked in a lot 2 streets away. I got it from the black market smuggled, no tracking devices. The supplies are already loaded, Sergey replied with a nod. All right, Pietro, grab your things and go first. Sergey and I will handle the watchers outside and follow you, Wanda instructed firmly. Pietro, feeling slighted, protested, hey, don't forget, I'm 10 minutes older than you, remember? Wanda smiled, her tone affectionate but resolute. Just go. Sergey chuckled at the sibling dynamic. In the past 2 years, the group had grown as close as family. He added with a teasing grin, I think Wanda's taken on the big sister role pretty well. Pietro shot him a middle finger, only to be met with a very stern glare from Wanda. Reluctantly, he grabbed a large box with one hand, took a deep breath, and in an instant, a breeze swept through the room. Pietro's figure vanished, moving so fast that he was gone before Sergey and Wanda could even register it. That kid's something else, Sergey remarked, impressed. With his speed and the wind-breathing technique, he's almost as fast as Boss Leon. Not quite, Wanda replied, her eyes softening at the mention of Leon. But her expression quickly shifted as she sensed the watchers outside preparing to make their move. Greedy fools, she muttered. Sergey, it's time to deal with them. Sergey's handsome face broke into a chilling smile. I've been waiting for this. Chapter 3 Chapter 10 to Chapter 15 The apartment door opened, and Sergey, along with Wanda in her sweatshirt, stepped out into the rain, umbrellas in hand. They got into the car parked on the street. The engine hummed to life, and the car began to slowly move away into the night. As the car neared the end of the road, several other vehicles quietly followed. Inside one of the SUVs, a man in a combat uniform sitting in the passenger seat pulled a pistol from under his arm, checking it carefully. In the back, 3 others were inspecting their own gear. Captain, besides us, there are others tailing the experimental subjects. Let them move first. We'll clean up after. No one leaves alive, the captain replied calmly. Understood. Their conversation was brief, and the mood remained eerily calm. As time passed, the lead car headed towards the suburbs, causing the captain in the passenger seat to frown. An inexplicable unease gnawed at him. He couldn't pinpoint the source of his discomfort, but it left him feeling guilty and unsettled. Was something off with the operation? No, it couldn't be. They were just a few ordinary experimental subjects with no awakened abilities. While he was lost in thought, the driver suddenly slowed down and said, Captain, the experimental subjects have parked at the abandoned factory. They stopped there. Is that their temporary base camp? The captain, gripping his gun, pulled out a high-precision infrared telescope and peered through the car window. He saw the vehicle parked in front of an abandoned factory. A man and a woman, the experimental subjects, exited the car and walked inside. The area was desolate. If anything went down here, it wouldn't attract any unwanted attention from the authorities. Yet, the unease in his heart only grew stronger. Suddenly, a thought struck him like lightning, and his face turned pale with horror. Not good. Before he could warn the others, a deafening roar shattered the tense silence, drawing everyone's attention forward. They all turned their gaze to the scene ahead, where the nearest vehicle had been crushed as if by a massive hammer, leaving it a total wreck. Blood flowed from the mangled car, mixing with the rain-soaked ground, painting it red. But what really captured everyone's attention was the figure responsible for the carnage, a towering man, standing like a god of war, on the roof of the destroyed car, dressed in a black trench coat. It was Sergey. Sergey stood on the roof of the car, gripping a specially crafted cross sword. He glanced at the trailing vehicles in the distance and inhaled deeply, his chest expanding as a rush of air filled his lungs. Phoo! With that breath, his physical abilities surged to their peak. The moment to strike had arrived. In combat, Sergey showed no mercy. Leon had drilled this into them during 2 years of intense training. The burden of taking a life did not weigh on him. After enduring so much darkness, he understood the harsh realities of their world. Boom! Sergey stomped down with his right foot, causing a blast of air as he propelled himself forward with speed that defied his massive frame. He became a blur, leaping 20 or 30 meters into the air and covering hundreds of meters in an instant. Like a meteorite, he descended upon one of the cars, creating such immense wind pressure that the people inside could barely move. They had just started to reach for their guns when Sergey struck. The car roof crumpled under his force, and they were crushed along with it. Bang! The car caved in, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. The sheer brutality of the scene sent waves of terror through the dozen or so men who had been following. Realization dawned on them: they were facing a monster. Damn it, he's a monster. Run! Panic set in as they started their engines and tried to flee, but their speed was no match for Sergei. He pursued them like a juggernaut on his powerful legs. Seeing him closing in at terrifying speed, the men were gripped with fear. Desperately, they pulled out their weapons and fired at Sergei. Sergei's eyes blazed with determination as he raced forward, his speed unrelenting. He swung the cross sword with precision, deflecting the hail of bullets with ease, sparks flying off with each deflection. As he closed in on the cars, now less than 100 meters away, he took a deep breath. Heat radiated from his body, and flames began to ignite around him. Flame breathing, fifth form flame tiger. Boom! Scorching flames erupted, evaporating the rain as they burst into life. The fire formed a giant, roaring tiger that enveloped Sergei, propelling him forward with even greater speed. In a flash, he bridged the 100-meter gap, leaving a fiery trail behind him. Boom! The flaming tiger smashed through the convoy with unstoppable force. In the horrified eyes of the men inside, several cars were obliterated in an instant, exploding into fiery wreckage. As the flames dissipated, Sergei stood amidst the wreckage, the fire still flickering around him. He turned his gaze to the last remaining car, not bothering to look back at the inferno behind him. Inside the car, the remaining Hydra soldiers were paralyzed with shock. The captain, realizing the danger, shouted, "Get out!" He fumbled for his communicator, trying to report the disaster unfolding. But before they could move, the ground beneath the car cracked open, and a surge of red energy erupted, forming a massive hand. The giant red hand grabbed the car, lifting it 2 meters off the ground. Panic swept through the Hydra agents as they realized they were trapped. The captain frantically dialed the communicator, but before he could speak, something caught his eye. Through the car window, he saw the girl in the gray sweatshirt standing more than 10 meters away. Her eyes glowed red, and her right hand was clenched into a fist. What is she doing? That was his last thought. As Wanda clenched her fist, the giant red energy hand gripping the SUV mimicked her motion, tightening its hold. In an instant, the SUV was crushed into a compact ball of metal. Creak, creak, boom. The sound of metal being compressed mixed with a deafening explosion, and in that moment, the Hydra agents inside were utterly obliterated. The mangled, burning wreckage of the car hit the ground with a heavy thud. Without a glance back, Wanda released her powers, turned, and walked away. 10 minutes later, on a highway under the dark night sky, an SUV was cruising along. In the driver's seat, Pietro, dressed in a T-shirt that highlighted his strong muscles, rested one hand on the steering wheel while the other supported his cheek against the window. He was humming an unknown tune, the light rain outside adding to his sense of comfort. Suddenly, 2 bursts of sound came from behind. Pietro frowned and glanced in the rearview mirror, spotting 2 figures wrapped in a kind of wave, running through the rain at superhuman speed. Before he could react, the 2 figures had already caught up with the SUV. Bang! The car doors opened and closed swiftly, and Wanda and Sergei were now seated inside. Pietro wasn't surprised by this scene that defied normal logic. He turned to his sister, who was taking off her hood in the passenger seat. Done. That was fast. How hard to deal do you expect a group of ordinary people to be? Wanda replied, leaning back in her chair and casually resting her slender legs on the plastic dashboard in front of her. After 2 years of intense training in water breathing, Wanda had also awakened her own power chaos magic. Combined, these abilities made her combat power formidable. Not to mention, Sergei alone could have taken care of all those people. With Leon's guidance, Sergei had perfected flame breathing, and after 2 years of relentless training, he had reached a level where he could maintain total concentration at all times. Under normal conditions, Sergei's speed is close to 200 meters per second, and it's still increasing rapidly. With such speed and strength, he could easily have taken down a Hydra base on his own 2 years ago. However, since these bases are typically equipped with self-destruction systems, only Pietro and Wanda could escape safely before an explosion, so Leon didn't involve them in the Hydra base raids. Hurry up, Pietro. This car is slower than a snail, Sergei grumbled from the back seat, casually setting his cross sword aside. He might have been getting hungry, eager to get back and eat. If you're in such a hurry, why don't you just run there? Pietro shot back, rolling his eyes, though he did press harder on the accelerator. The SUV surged forward, speeding down the dark road. Less than an hour later, they arrived at a small forest near the Ural Mountains and pulled over. After exiting the car, Sergei, Pietro, and Wanda each grabbed 2 large metal boxes. They immediately increased their speed to Th. Extreme, moving towards the Ural Mountains so fast that they were barely visible to the naked eye. 10 minutes later, they reached their home. The wooden house had undergone significant changes over the past 2 years. It had been renovated and expanded, now covering more than 400 square meters with 2 floors. The second floor housed the bedrooms, while the ground floor featured the living room, bathroom, and kitchen. A warehouse had also been built behind the house. Before the three of them entered the wooden house, they could hear the familiar sounds of conversation and laughter inside. Climbing the steps, they walked through the open door and into the house. The first thing they noticed was a long rug stretching from the entrance to the living room, adding a rustic touch to the space. Electric bulbs lined the walls, and a crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling. The living room's decor was simple yet had a retro and heavy feel, giving the spacious room a grand atmosphere. The stone fireplace, extending up to the roof, was the room's focal point and the most striking feature. Nearby, a large round dining table sat at the edge of the living room, ample enough for everyone to dine together. The kitchen was equipped with modern appliances, blending old and new. A large LCD TV and several big sofas made the living room cozy and inviting. More than a dozen people were lounging on the sofas, watching TV with great interest, occasionally discussing and laughing about what was on screen. As soon as Wanda, Sergei, and Pietro returned home, they immediately drew the attention of the others. Two 10-year-old girls, who had been curled up on the sofa, turned around and peered over the back of it with wide eyes. They cheered and greeted Wanda and the others excitedly. "Sister Wanda, Sergei, Pietro, you're back. Hey, Alina, Polina, come here. I brought you some snacks." Wanda smiled gently at the two little girls as she set down the metal boxes she had been carrying. After taking off her shoes and slipping on cotton slippers, she pulled 2 bags of chocolate snacks from her pocket and shook them playfully. The girls' eyes lit up with excitement, but just as they were about to leap forward with joy, Leon's voice called out, stopping them in their tracks. "Alina, Polina, you just had ice cream earlier, so no chocolate today. Have you forgotten the toothache you had last year, with all the tears and runny noses?" Hearing Leon's words, the two little girls looked disappointed and turned their heads to him. Wanda's eyes lit up as she joined them in looking toward the kitchen. There, Leon appeared, wearing a black and white checkered shirt, carrying an iron pot, which he placed on the large round table without minding the heat. The table was already covered with a variety of dishes. As Leon set the pot down, he noticed the lingering tension around Wanda and Sergei, the aura of recent battle still clinging to them. His brows furrowed slightly, but he chose not to comment. Instead, he said, "I heard the noise. I figured you'd be here soon." Clapping his hands to get everyone's attention, Leon invited the family to start dinner. The group in the living room cheered, getting up from the sofas. They joked and laughed as they headed to the bathroom to wash their hands. Afterward, they crowded around the kitchen, grabbing utensils and taking their seats at the table. Wanda, Sergei, and Pietro joined in, helping to uncover the dishes and reveal a spread of fragrant delicacies. Wow! Everyone's faces lit up with eager anticipation. Leon chuckled and began serving himself, prompting the others to dive into the meal. 2 years had passed, and the once little kids had grown significantly. Even the two 10-year-old girls had appetites 2 or 3 times larger than that of an average adult. The meal prepared for them was a feast of hearty dishes like roasted suckling pig, whole lamb, steak, and stewed chicken. Without following the strategy of robbing the rich and giving to the poor for the last 2 years, it would have been nearly impossible to support such a large family. During the meal, everyone chatted occasionally. They had no strict rules about eating, talking, or sleeping. After finishing, a few people took turns clearing the table and washing the dishes, while others moved to the living room sofa with their desserts, waiting for the rest to join. Once everyone was there, Leon took out the remote control, paused the TV, and began discussing business. He first looked at Wanda, who nodded in response. "In the past 2 months, we've gone to the city to replenish supplies. There were intense gang fights, and several gangs we'd robbed before have been eliminated. While this initially had nothing to do with us, they somehow noticed us, and then Hydra found us. I suspect Hydra is connected to these gangs and has been keeping an eye on us. The reason is straightforward. Despite their efforts to stay hidden, their increasing need for supplies has attracted unwanted attention, something unavoidable. Fortunately, most of these groups are minor threats. Over 2 years, their strength has grown, so they can largely be ignored. However, Hydra is different. Although Baron Strucker's faction is weaker than others in Hydra, their foundations are strong, and have ties to various countries, oligarchs, and governments in Eastern Europe. They don't have to operate in the shadows, but once they're exposed, trouble follows." Leon took a sip of coffee and placed the cup back on the table. "Don't worry about them for now. Our location is well hidden, and they won't find us easily. What matters now is that you need more growth." As he spoke, he looked at everyone, his gaze moving from Wanda to Sergei and the others. "You've each developed your own breathing technique, and most of you have reached the state of total concentration, but that's not enough. You still need more time to grow. Armament hockey and observation hockey are crucial for your journey to becoming stronger, so you can't afford to slack off." 2 years of practice and training with him had transformed this group of ordinary kids into something more. The breathing techniques they learned have great potential, but they have limits. The two hockey are different. Over the past 2 years, Leon had gained the power of the 3 forms of hockey. In addition to Conqueror's hockey, he also taught Wanda and the others armament and observation hockey, which significantly accelerated their growth. The breathing techniques improve physical fitness, while the hockey, when fully developed, can unleash enough power to destroy a town with a single punch like a walking nuclear bomb. But this kind of power can only be built through hard training and time. It wasn't their time yet. Even after 2 years of intense training, Leon himself hadn't reached the level of an admiral. His cautious nature made him decide to stay hidden for another 2 years, refusing to come out until he reached that level. During this time, he accumulated rewards from 2 years of sign-ins, expecting the rewards to be generous. How generous remained to be seen. No one objected to Leon's plan. Over the past 2 years, Leon's status among them had grown immensely. His words were law, and no one dared to question him. Besides, these children, who had lost their families and grown up in darkness, loved the life they had now. They trained, grew, played, laughed, and hunted together, living the life they had always dreamed of. What more could they ask for? Leon rubbed the heads of the 2 10-year-old girls sitting next to him, who grinned up at him. After a moment of thought, he turned to Wanda. You're in a golden period of growth, but you need more nutrients than just food can provide. When I raided the Hydra base, I found a formula for a nutrient solution. Soon, we'll need to get the materials for it. Wanda's eyes lit up with joy, and she nodded. I understand. Good. You don't need to go to Yekaterinburg for now. Go to a nearby city instead. Sergei will assist you. Got it, Sergei said. Pietro and the others nodded in agreement. Alright, in the next few days, I'll show you some new tricks. Your strength is important, but you also need to develop your own skills, mysteries, and moves, Leon said, causing everyone's expressions to change except for Wanda, whose eyes lit up with anticipation. Haha, I'm going to rest now. Today's training was exhausting, someone said, followed by another, me too. Good night, everyone. As the group scattered, clearly uneasy, Leon couldn't help but laugh. Over the past 2 years, alongside intense training, he had often pushed them hard, maybe even too hard, enough to give them PTSD. Aren't you going to rest, Wanda? Leon asked gently. Wanda hesitated. It seems you have something on your mind, Leon observed, noticing her expression. With a smile, he stood up and led Wanda towards the door. Leon and Wanda sat side by side on the wooden railing of the porch, gazing into the distance. The sky was covered by light rain, falling gently under the moonlight. The orange glow from inside the wooden house pushed back the darkness, blending with the fading daylight. The drizzle fell steadily on the soil in front of them, where wooden stakes, scarred from repeated blows, stood as silent witnesses to their training. Neither of them spoke, simply listening to the soft patter of rain and the distant chirping of insects and birds. After a while, Wanda broke the silence. I never thought Pietro and I would have a day like this, she said softly. Leon murmured in acknowledgement. Sometimes I feel really lucky that we ended up at the same base as you, Leon. Wanda turned to look at Leon, his sharp features highlighted by the warm, yellow light. Her heart skipped a beat. I can see that Pietro has come out of his despair and is truly happy now, she added. And you? Leon asked, turning to meet Wanda's gaze with a smile. Me too, Wanda replied, suddenly flustered. She quickly turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. We no longer dwell on the past, the future is ours, and together we'll reach heights that will capture the world's attention, Leon said, almost out of habit. These children are still sensitive, and as a parental figure, he feels responsible for guiding them out of the shadows of their past. Doesn't want any of them to carry lingering darkness in their hearts, which could lead to depression later on. So far, his efforts have been successful. In 2 years, the children have regained their confidence and warmth. Wanda, being a bit more sensitive, requires a little extra attention from him. Wanda, following Leon's lead, felt her lingering emotions dissolve with his words. She lifted her gaze to the sky, her big eyes bright as she looked through the distant woods at the incomplete moon, lost in thought. While Leon's side was filled with laughter, Baron Strucker was far from pleased. 2 years ago, a group of experimental subjects, including Leon, had broken through the base and escaped. Leon's successful awakening of his abilities had fueled Strucker's fanaticism, making him believe Leon was the key to Hydra's world domination. But for over a year, Leon and the others vanished without a trace, as if they'd disappeared from the face of the earth. Despite deploying most of Hydra's resources, they found no clues. Just when Strucker was on the verge of despair, half a year ago, one of his bases was suddenly attacked by what felt like a divine force. In the time since their escape, the experimental subjects had undergone significant changes, with Leon's strength becoming extraordinary. He not only stole supplies and money from the base but also buried all the Hydra soldiers and scientists there. Soon after, 2 more bases were easily destroyed. Realizing that Leon must have obtained the Hydra base distribution map from the original experimental base, Strucker panicked. He was forced to abandon his original bases, leave the castle, and search for new locations. This series of events strained him severely, despite his vast resources. Baron Strucker found himself in an increasingly difficult situation. Analysis showed that Leon's abilities were not only powerful but also highly unique. Leon seemed capable of controlling light energy, allowing him to fly in an elemental form at astonishing speeds. In fact, surveillance footage from the destroyed bases had to be slowed down hundreds of times just to capture his figure. When Leon was in his elemental form, conventional weapons were entirely ineffective against him. It was as if Strucker's arsenal had been rendered useless. A single laser beam from Leon had the destructive power of a TNT bomb, and a mere stomp could cause an entire base to collapse instantly. This level of power far exceeded Strucker's expectations, reversing the roles between hunter and prey. The situation gave Strucker a terrible headache. What kind of monster had he created? In just 2 years, Leon had grown beyond control. The worst part was that Strucker's desperate efforts to reclaim the experimental data had proven futile. Over the past 2 years, he had invested vast amounts of money and time in attempting to replicate Leon's abilities, but all his experiments had failed. His scientists concluded that the data from subject number 37 was entirely normal, making replication impossible. In other words, Leon's ability awakening was completely unique. When Strucker first heard the news, his initial reaction was to pull out his gun and shoot the incompetent fools one by one. The frustration was overwhelming. Should he ask for help? Strucker found himself at a crossroads. Boom. On the edge of a cliff near a waterfall in the Ural Mountains, a figure was flung across the river like a cannonball, crashing through dozen trees before finally coming to a stop. The violent impact caused blood to surge through Sergei's body, and his internal organs felt as if they had been shaken. Despite the brutal blow, Sergei didn't stay down. He immediately got back up, ignoring the shattered trees around him. He took a deep breath, focusing on the thunderous roars and explosions that echoed in his ears. A scorching heat surrounded him, and red flames flickered around him. The cross sword in his hand began to glow faintly red. Bang! With a powerful step, the ground beneath him cracked, and Sergei spiraled through the air, engulfed in blazing flames. A second later, the force of his movement created a massive wind pressure that bent the surrounding trees and vegetation. In less than a second, he crossed over 200 meters and arrived at the riverbank. Sergei let out a low shout. Flame breathing, fifth form, flame tiger. With a thunderous roar, the flames transformed into a giant tiger, charging toward the golden figure floating above the river. Sergei swung his cross sword with all his might, the blade now completely engulfed in flames. The strike was powerful enough to split a heavy tank in two. However, bang! At the critical moment, a dark finger blocked the sword. The collision between the finger and the blade generated a terrifying shockwave, sending turbulent air currents sweeping in all directions. The force of the impact nearly made Sergei lose his grip on the sword. His eyes widened in disbelief. He had known for some time that Boss Leon's strength was on a different level, but seeing Leon block his full-force blow with just one finger was hard to comprehend. How much training must one undergo to achieve such power? Before Sergei could react, he saw Leon's black rags and coat billowing wildly in the air currents. Leon's sharp eyes locked onto Sergei as he whispered, "Facing a powerful enemy, distraction is a death sentence." As soon as the words left his mouth, Leon suddenly raised his right leg. A surging golden light flowed over his foot, and in the next instant, he kicked Sergei fiercely in the chest. The speed was so incredible that there was no time to react. Sergei felt a crushing sense of impending doom, his scalp tingling with fear. In a desperate move, he mustered all his strength, pushing his body to its limits. He managed to raise his sword just in time to block the kick. Boom! Sergei was sent hurtling into the depths of the river like a meteorite, creating massive columns of water as he crashed down. "Wow!" came excited exclamations from across the river. A group of kids stood on the opposite bank, watching with glee as Sergei got a beating. Their excitement was understandable, they'd all been in his shoes before. After all, seeing someone else in pain often brings a strange sense of satisfaction. Pietro, in particular, was enjoying the scene. Lately, he'd been acting a bit too cocky. His super speed made him the fastest, second only to Leon, and his strength had grown as a result. That success had fed his pride. Leon didn't want Pietro's overconfidence to lead to carelessness like getting grazed by a bullet in the future. So, he struck hard, almost humbling the boy into submission. Using his superior speed, Leon quickly overwhelmed Pietro, landing a swift kick to his backside. After a few more kicks, Pietro felt his ray go numb. Frustrated, he eventually gave up and lay flat on the ground, no longer bothering to resist. Meanwhile, his friends seized the moment to tease him. Pietro had always loved taunting them with his speed, so they had long been eager to see him taken down a peg. It was Leon who finally knocked his arrogance down. The kids squatting on the riverbank gazed up at Leon, who hovered in the air like a radiant sun, their eyes filled with envy. Flying was the ability everyone craved most. Seeing the world from the sky was entirely different from seeing it from the ground. The younger ones especially loved to sweet-talk Leon into taking them on sky-high adventures, and when they returned, they couldn't stop bragging about it. The envy from the others was palpable. "Wow, Sergei's really taking a beating. He still hasn't gotten up," said Loman, a 12-year-old boy standing at 1.65 meters, peering toward the middle of the river, where only a few bubbles were rising to the surface. "Hey, Boss Leon's light speed kick could knock down a mountain." "Sergei's definitely hurting," Pietro gloated. "I'm not so sure." Wanda, standing beside Pietro, shook her head slightly. Having spent so much time together, she could see how much Sergei had grown. Leon mentioned that Sergei's physical talent is second only to Gennady and Sumarokov. Plus, Leon didn't use the full force of his kick, so Sergei's probably still looking for a chance to counterattack. Tisk, the others grumbled. When it came to physical talent, the rest of the group, Pietro included, couldn't help but feel a bit sour. Only Gennady and Sumarokov shrugged, unfazed. At nearly 13, Gennady and Sumarokov had fully tapped into their physical potential, thanks to intense training and nutrition. They already stood an impressive 1.8 meters tall, with broad shoulder and solid frames on par with full-grown, strong Eastern European men. The rest of the group lagged far behind, with the tallest not even reaching 1.7 meters. The gap in physical talent was clear. Physical talent involves more than height, it includes bone density, skeletal structure, and muscle strength. Gennady, Sumarokov, and Sergei excelled in these areas, which gave them a significant edge in combat. Over the past 2 years, their strength had far outpaced the rest of the group. Without their special abilities, even Pietro and Wanda would have fallen behind the three of them. Sergei, in particular, had mastered flame breathing, greatly enhancing his strength. While he wasn't as physically powerful as Gennady and Sumarokov, nor as fast as Pietro, his balanced abilities, combined with the sheer destructive power of flame breathing, made him a formidable fighter. Just as Wanda predicted, Sergei had been kicked to the bottom of the river by Leon's light-speed strike. Though he blocked it with his sword, the force left faint cracks in the blade, and it was slightly bent. Still, Sergei refused to give up. Instead, he used the opportunity to think through how to leverage his strengths and tactics for a counterattack. Maybe, bubbles gurgled from his mouth as Sergei crouched at the riverbed, gripping his sword with both hands. The hilt rested on his right shoulder. Even without oxygen, he was determined to summon his power. Boom! A fierce wave of scorching heat erupted. The intense heat caused the surrounding water to boil instantly, sending a surge of white bubbles rushing to the surface. The powerful force began to spin the water, creating a massive whirlpool in seconds. The sudden shift in the river immediately drew the attention of Wanda and the others, who were watching from the shore. High above, Leon's red coat flapped wildly in the wind. A slight smirk played on his lips as he looked down at the scene. Using the environment to obscure vision is clever, but, boom. It was as if thousands of tons of dynamite had exploded. The clear whirlpool turned a deep red, like a fiery cloud sinking into the river's depths. In the next moment, a massive ball of red flames took the shape of a roaring bear, fangs bared as it charged toward the sky. The heat evaporated the surrounding water droplets, reducing visibility as steam filled the air. The fiery bear, fueled by explosive power, seemed determined to tear Leon apart. Leon inhaled deeply, the air rushing into his lungs like a hurricane. He slightly raised his right hand, clenched his fist, and a dark, ominous glow spread over it. His eyes sharpened like an eagle's. As the flame bear lunged, Leon twisted his body and unleashed a powerful punch. His fist collided with the bear's fiery claws, sending it flying back. Sparks erupted like red fireworks in the sky, beautiful but short-lived. Yet, there was no sign of Sergei. Suddenly, from behind, Sergei's voice came, filled with excitement, flame breathing, flame tornado. A massive tornado of fire appeared, roaring toward Leon as it spiraled with destructive energy, as if it would consume everything in its path. Within the fiery vortex, Sergei's silhouette flickered in and out of view. But Leon reacted swiftly. He turned, his hand cutting through the flaming tornado with precision, and caught Sergei by the neck like a steel vice. In an instant, the swirling flames disappeared, and the red sky brightened as the heat dissipated. Hovering in the air with Sergei in his grasp, Leon sighed. Who taught you to shout out your moves during a fight? Is it just because it sounds cool? Leon had just finished pointing out everyone's weaknesses in combat and training. Noticing that it was almost noon, he decided to have a barbecue by the river. The group was excited by the idea and eagerly returned to the wooden house to gather the barbecue tools. Since they were all big eaters, they had bought plenty of food. There was no worry about running out. The ingredients were plentiful, including a whole lamb, beef cattle, suckling pig, and whole chicken. Over the past 2 years, everyone had become skilled at grilling, especially the simple technique of barbecue. With 2 bonfires set up, they placed the meats on the grills. As the meat roasted, it became crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Once sprinkled with the prepared barbecue sauce, the aroma filled the air, making everyone's mouths water. Alongside the meats, there were frozen fruit drinks and vegetable salads, creating a rich and satisfying meal. Eating was casual, everyone either stood or sat on rocks, tearing into the lamb and beef, chatting and laughing. The youngest children played around, chasing each other and adding to the joyful atmosphere. Leon, watching from the grill, smiled slightly. He enjoyed this comfortable, relaxed moment, appreciating the break from his usual state of anxiety and urgency. While he always felt a sense of crisis and was motivated by the need to protect himself from those who sought to harm him, he found solace in these peaceful, ordinary moments. He had a particular disdain for Hydra but acknowledged that, in a way, their actions had been somewhat useful. Despite his desire to eliminate them, he was not ready to do so just yet. At least Leon had a clear goal. to harvest the benefits from Hydra's efforts on this Eastern European continent. Hydra had accumulated a lot of advanced technology and resources, and Leon looked forward to reaping the rewards of their hard work. After their barbecue feast, it was back to intense training. However, 2 days later, it was time to replenish their supplies, mainly to purchase materials for the nutrient solution. The nutrient solution developed by Hydra was a marvel of black technology. It contained biologically synthesized proteins and compounds essential for the human body, requiring specially designed equipment. A single bottle of this concentrated nutrient solution could provide all the nutrients needed for a day. It was perfect for Leon and his team and crucial for their growth. Leon took Sergei and Wanda with him to Perm, a city located near Yekaterinburg. The direct distance is only 291 kilometers, but it was still a bit of a drive. They found a pickup truck on the opposite side of the mountain road and set off for Perm. The trip took just over 3 hours. Compared to Yekaterinburg, Perm is slightly smaller but remains one of Russia's largest industrial cities. Despite its industrial nature, Perm is known for its beautiful natural scenery. The city is surrounded by forests and the Kama River runs through it. There are 2 forest parks and an artificial butterfly garden within the city. As they entered Perm, they were greeted by buildings in the classic Russian style. The streets of Perm were bustling, with crowds growing denser as they approached the city center. Leon, Sergei, and Wanda first found a hotel called Amax Premier and checked in. To get around the issue of identity verification, they had purchased fake identity documents from the black market in Yekaterinburg. The fakes were convincing enough to avoid any issues. After settling into their hotel room, they grabbed a map of Perm from the lobby and began exploring the city like typical tourists. Despite its industrial reputation, Perm was lively, with busy streets and lots of traffic. Wanda, though mature for her age, was still a young girl and enjoyed taking in the sights of the bustling city. The trio wandered into a neighborhood where Leon noticed a restaurant. Checking his watch, he suggested, "That restaurant looks good. Let's give it a try." Wanda and Sergei, who were feeling hungry, agreed and followed Leon inside. The restaurant had a simple, unadorned decor with a touch of Russian ruggedness. It was spacious and clean but not overcrowded. They chose a table by the window and ordered a variety of dishes. As they chatted and waited for their food, a news segment on the TV caught their attention. A reporter was interviewing the Russian police, and the news seemed to be quite intriguing. The news on TV grabbed the trio's attention. Just last night, a theater 2 streets away had been the scene of explosions and gun battles, resulting in over 20 civilian casualties. This wasn't just a gang shootout, it was something more serious. The police described it as a dramatic chase. The odd part was that no bodies were left behind. After the female reporter interviewed the police, she showed a video. In the blurry footage, it was hard to make out details, but it was clear that the person being chased was a woman. Despite being pursued by more than a dozen attackers, she managed to escape. "I couldn't sleep because of this," one restaurant guest said. "There were a lot of police dispatched last night. My newborn kept getting scared out of sleep. Yesterday night was hell. Oh, as for me, I saw the explosions and gunfire from the theater," another guest added. "God, I thought they were terrorists. But the person being hunted was a woman." Someone else said, "She must be really powerful. Could she be a spy?" The other guests in the restaurant were buzzing with speculation. Leon's gaze shifted slightly, and Sergei, who was seated with his back to the TV, turned around with a frown. "These people are really something," he remarked. Wanda, clearly impressed, added, "That woman was amazing. To escape under such heavy fire is not something ordinary people can do." Leon nodded. "It's interesting, but it isn't something we need to concern ourselves with. Let's finish our meal and get back to our plans."